Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about phrases. This is an introductory lesson for my English 1 and 2 classes. Please make sure that you have your guided notes either printed out with a pen or pencil in front of you, or you've split your screen like you see here with your notes on one side and the lesson on the other, either the Zoom lesson we're having or the video to this lesson. If you've not already done so, go ahead and click this link to get your copy of the guided notes, and please make sure to organize them into a folder in your Google Drive. You will need to access these guided notes throughout the next few weeks, so please make sure you have them organized well. My suggestion is that you make a folder inside your English folder titled Grammar and place all your guided notes in there. All right, here we go. What are phrases? So the purpose of this lesson, this grammar lesson, is so that you're able to become familiarized with phrases. By the end of this entire unit on phrases, you should be able to, I'm going to let it load up here, identify phrases in a sentence, explain the function of phrases in a sentence, and finally, use your knowledge of phrases in your own writing and speaking of English. This will be split into two lessons. Lesson 1, we're going to be going over what a phrase is as well as prepositional phrases. In Lesson 2, we'll be expanding on prepositional phrases, talking about adverb and adjective phrases. Your notes are also split up by lesson, so we are going to be focusing on Lesson 1, what is a phrase and prepositional phrases. First thing I want you to do is take a look at these 4 groups of words that I've written here. What do you notice about each of these groups of words to the left? I want you on your guided notes now to write at least 3 things you notice on your guided notes. If this is a video that you're watching, you can go ahead and pause this now. All right, sometimes it's difficult to think about what we notice because it's also the things that aren't there that we need to pay attention to. So if you look at these 4 groups of words, you'll notice that I have highlighted the first word in each of the groups. Each of these words are prepositions. So all of these groups of words start with prepositions. Now let's move on to maybe the part that you didn't quite get. None of them have a subject. None of them have a person, place, or thing that is doing an action. They might have a person, place, or thing in them, but they're not doing the action. For example, let's look at the second one here, for you from Uncle Steve. You might think you and or Uncle Steve are subjects, but they're not because they're not doing anything. A subject has to do something for it to be considered a subject. These are just considered nouns. Okay, what else do they not have? They do not have verbs. So because they don't have subjects, they don't have any action in them. All right, saying that of the mammals in the world, in is not a verb. It's not an action. It's not a state of being. So it's not a verb. None of these have verbs. So they all start with prepositions. None of them have subjects and none of them have verbs. And the fact that you can say that about at least 4 different groupings of words means that there has to be some kind of pattern here. And what that pattern is the definition of what a phrase is. A phrase is a group of words that is used as a single part of speech. So it might be used as an adjective, it might be used as an adverb or as a noun, but it does not contain both a verb nor its subject. So it will be a group of words, but it will not contain a verb or its subject. And that should say verb. My apologies there. So please make sure you're filling in these definitions on your guided notes as we go. If you need to pause the video, you can go ahead and do that at any time. If this is a live lecture, I'll go ahead and make sure to pause and give you time. All right, now let's take some practice here. We know that a phrase does not have a subject, does not have a verb. I'll tell you right now that the types of phrases we're focusing on right now are prepositional phrases. And like that previous slide showed you, they all started with prepositions. So based on knowing that they all start with prepositions, they don't have subjects, and they don't have verbs, I want you to take a look at these following phrases, or groups of words, I should say, and tell me if they are a phrase, or not a phrase. On your guided notes, you can either put a P or NP next to them. So go ahead and pause this video and do that on your guided notes now. All right, so let's see what we got. When you know, that is not a phrase. You have a subject, you, doing the action of knowing, a verb. Because it has a subject and a verb, it's not a phrase. As they walked in, this is also not a phrase. It has a subject, they, doing the action of walking. So you have a subject and a verb. That makes it not a phrase. In the garden, this is a phrase. It starts with the preposition in. It doesn't have a subject, and it doesn't have an action. To laugh at myself. This is also a phrase. It starts with the preposition to, but more than that, it doesn't have an action because laugh, although it might seem like an action, no one's doing that. There's not a subject doing the action. So that's not considered an action in this case. It's actually considered an infinitive, which we'll talk about in 8th grade. All right. At myself, again, not a subject because it doesn't have a verb. How she remembered. This is not a phrase. It's not a complete sentence, but it's not a phrase because you have she, the subject, doing the action of remembering. Again, you have a subject and a verb. It's not a phrase. Where the car is. Again, this is not a phrase because we have the subject, car, and the verb is. So it is not a phrase. Hope you guys did all right with that. All right, let's do a little bit more practice now. What I'd like you to do in the following sentences is highlight the phrase. You can do this on your guided notes. So go ahead and pause this video now and highlight each of the following sentences. All right, how did you do? Let's take a look. The phrase in the first sentence, one of the soldiers was Jan C. Scruggs, is of these soldiers. You'll see that it starts with a preposition of, and then we ended it with the word soldiers. And the reason why we did that is because the next word after soldiers is the verb was, and we know that phrases cannot have verbs in it. Number 2, Maya Lin designed the memorial that now stands in Washington, D.C. We have the phrase in Washington, D.C. starts with the preposition in and ends at the end of the sentence. Number 3, now the names of those who died in Vietnam will never be forgotten by the American people. There are 3 different phrases in here. We have of those who died, and the reason why we stopped that phrase there is because the next word is the beginning of a new phrase. So it is a new preposition, in Vietnam. And we stopped that there because the next word will is a helping verb, and verbs cannot be parts of phrases. By the American people. We start with by because it is the preposition, and we end with people because that is where the sentence ends. If you guys have any questions at this point, please go ahead and write them down on a separate sheet of paper so that you can ask them at the end of the lesson. All right. So far, we've been talking about phrases in general, but really we have been focusing on something called prepositional phrases. And prepositional phrases start with a preposition. If we remember from our parts of speech unit, a preposition is anything that an airplane can do to a cloud. It can go through, above, in between, around, under, to, from. And there's some tricky prepositions as well, like of, that a lot of people don't remember. So a prepositional phrase starts with a preposition. I put in parentheses here and includes the object of preposition and any modifiers of the object. However, we haven't yet spoken about objects and what that means, so I'm not expecting you to understand that part of the definition. What I am expecting you to be able to understand are the highlighted parts. So a prepositional phrase starts with a preposition and can act as an adjective or an adverb in a sentence. Because remember, phrases are groups of words that act like a single modifier or a single part of speech. In this case, adjectives or adverbs for prepositional phrases. So you can think of prepositional phrases like the parents, and they have 2 kids, adjective and adverbs. Okay, so adjectives and adverbs are types of prepositional phrases. It's just depending on how they behave, how they function, as to whether or not they're an adjective or an adverb. And this will make more sense as we continue on with this lesson. Let's take a look at our examples here. Into the thick mist vanished the carriage. I have underlined and bolded the prepositional phrase here, into the thick mist. Of course, it starts with the preposition into. That is definitely something an airplane can do to a cloud. And the reason why it stops at mist is because the word after it, vanished, is a verb, and verbs cannot be parts of phrases. So I know to stop, that the phrase stops here. Now, can I take this entire thing out, this entire phrase out, and replace it with something else? Absolutely. So, really, prepositional phrases are put into writing to make it more interesting, to make it flow better, and to make it sound more elevated. So, this is really going to help you with your writing. If you can start using more of these prepositional phrases, that's how you're going to get those sentences to expand. That's how you're going to be able to communicate exactly what you mean and put that image in your reader's mind more effectively. Let's take a look at our second example. Come with Rick and me to the concert. Again, we have the preposition to. That is something an airplane can do to a cloud. It can go to a cloud or toward a cloud. And then we have it ending at concert, and it ends there because that's where the punctuation mark is. That's the end of the sentence. So these are both examples of prepositional phrases because they start with a preposition. They do not include a subject. They do not include a verb, but they do act like adjectives or adverbs. All right, so let's take some time here and practice. I'd like you guys to go ahead and highlight the prepositional phrases in these following 3 sentences. This is also found on your guided notes, so you can go ahead and pause the video here and please highlight the prepositional phrases. Okay, how did you guys do? Let's see. Scruggs decided he would raise funds for a Vietnam Veterans Memorial. We have the prepositional phrase for a Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Starts with the preposition for and ends after the word memorial because, of course, that's the end of the sentence. Number 2, the memorial would include the names of all American men and women who were missing in action or who had died. We have 2 different prepositional phrases here. Of all American men and women, starting with the preposition of and ending with women, because the word right after it is a subject going with the verb were. So who is the subject going with the verb, the helping verb were, the complete verb phrase, of course, is were missing. So we don't include these because they're subjects that go with verbs, and subjects and verbs do not belong in phrases. All right. Finally, we have in action. We have a very short phrase here that starts with the preposition in and ends with action. The reason why we don't include or who had died is because this or is a conjunction that's connecting, and we don't really need to include conjunctions in our phrases because it's just connecting to a whole new part of the sentence, which has a new subject and verb. Had died is the verb. Had is the helping verb. Died is the main verb. Who would actually be the subject. So you would not include any of those, and we don't include the conjunction here. All right, and finally, number 3, organizing the project took years of great effort. Our prepositional phrase is of great effort, starts with the preposition of, and ends with the word effort because that's the end of the sentence. All right, so you guys need to go ahead now. That's the end of lesson 1. You need to go ahead now and go back over to your notes and fill out the reflection questions. Think about those wisely, and then let me know if you guys have any remaining questions to this. You can either raise your hand in class, or you can send me an email or remind message to let me know if you have any questions that I have not answered as of yet.